Okay. What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob, here today with the brand ambassador of Macallan and Highland Park. All right, so.
Hey guys, my name is Nick Villalon. I'm the national brand ambassador, as Rob said, for the Macallan and Highland Park. Actually, it's a banner called Edrington, small Scottish company that owns a few brands, but those are our single malts.
That's right. So, a little different than usual. It's not quite a review. We're going to talk about the expressions that Macallan has, the expressions that Highland Park has, give you guys some information about that, what's new and upcoming, and we'll go from there. This is one of what I hope to be a series of brand ambassador interviews. Nick is the first, so welcome. And
Thank you. Well, honored to be here. Obviously, it's always a pleasure to get to share a little bit of my passion for whiskey with people who have the same interest in it. And I think it's always interesting. One of the questions I get the most when I discuss with people about my position as brand ambassador, a lot of people ask me how it all started. For me, it started about just over a decade ago now, when I first got introduced to whiskey. Like most people, I think it was an older gentleman in my family that actually got me introduced to this stuff. I first started off with the basic entry-level product that everybody knows, but then I got introduced to those higher-end products and started to really see kind of the difference, not only in terms of flavor profile, but mostly at that age in terms of price. And I think that's kind of what sparked my my interest. I was wondering what made one product so much greater than another one. And I kind of started looking into that a little bit deeper, all the way into university, where I studied microbiology, and a big part of my interest was to learn about the process, how we make fermented and distilled liquids. So from beer to wine, but namely whiskey as well.
Wow, nice.
And from that understanding, I started to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. I like to say that whenever someone kind of gets interested in whiskey for the first time, to be careful, because it's a very deep rabbit hole, and once you look into it, there's no coming back once you fall. From there on, I guess my knowledge got to the point where, as a bartender, which was what I was doing to kind of put me through school back then, I started kind of telling people a little bit more about what they would be drinking, and a real interest would be sparked in my clientele, to the point where I started getting educated more and more about the specific brands, and eventually I got noticed by the wonderful people at Beam Suntory, who hired me, and the rest is kind of history up until today, into my position of brand ambassador.
So can you kind of explain that connection to Beam Suntory, maybe? Really
Yeah, absolutely. So Edrington is the owner brand of Macallan and Highland Park. We also own some blended Scotch companies and the famous Grouse's Cuddy Sark, as well as a rum brand located in the Dominican Republic called Brugal. If you've ever been to the Dominican Republic, you know about Brugal. It's that beautiful bottle in the net. And two of the more recent addition to that portfolio is Snow Leopard Vodka, out of Poland, and Partida Tequila, obviously out of Mexico.
Nice.
Now, Edrington itself doesn't have a hub here in Canada, so Beam Suntory is in charge of our distribution throughout the country.
Okay, and that's actually where we are right now. We're in the Beam Suntory office, Suntory. I always mix that up in pronunciation. My subscribers know I kind of butcher pretty much every type of pronunciation there is. So.
Well, in Scotch whiskey, that must be pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, yeah, so I definitely I hear from them every once in a while, but they help me out. They like to write in the comments below. It's actually pronounced like this, not like that. So.
Well, I don't know about your Gaelic, but my Gaelic is not so good, so I won't hold it against you for sure.
Thank you, I appreciate it. All right, so some of the brands we have here, we have the Macallan Rare Cask, which some of my subscribers had the opportunity to see my review of. We have the Macallan Edition number 2, what we think is going to be the Canadian expression.
Yeah, this is a Canadian expression of the Macallan 12-year-old Double Cask, and big classics here in Highland Park with the 21 and the 25.
Heavy hitters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I decided to bring out those bottles specifically because, specifically for Macallan, they're some of our newer products that get a lot of attention, that I get to talk about quite regularly from which I get the most questioned about as well. So it's always interesting to kind of go over those few products, you know, starting with the Macallan 12 Double Cask, which hopefully will be in the LCBO within the next month here in Ontario. A beautiful expression of the Macallan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm always very, very adamant about responsible consumption, so I don't like to call it an everyday whiskey.
Right.
I'll call it an any day whiskey.
An any day whiskey, that's a great way to put it.
So,
Yeah.
great price point is going to be coming in at just under $100.
Okay,
And it's the true identity of the Macallan put in a bottle right here. A truly sherried whiskey, which is what Macallan is known for. Really,
Right.
we're the biggest investor when it comes to the sherry cask in the Scotch industry, spending upwards of $50 million a year on new casks alone. Making us the owner of anywhere from 80 to 90% of every single sherry cask in the world at any given time.
Wow.
You know, if tomorrow Macallan stops making sherry whiskey, the sherry industry will just collapse.
Wow.
That's how big of an influence that we have on
That's
it.
huge.
Yeah, and it's a huge part in what makes our whiskey so great and so unique. It's that full maturation process in the sherry cask.
Okay,
You
so
know-
what do you mean by that exactly?
A lot of sherry malts that we know today are finished in sherry
That's
casks,
right,
right?
yeah.
Where most of the aging process will take place in bourbon barrels,
Mhm.
which is what about 95% of the industry uses to mature the whiskey.
That's true.
And then the last anywhere from 3 to 18 months, 24 months, whatever the company decides to do, is going to be that sherry
That's right.
influence. Now, you get a very, very different flavor profile from doing a sherry finish as opposed to doing a full maturation in sherry. The reason behind that is that once you get a sherry cask, there's up to 30 liters of sherry that's soaked into that barrel.
Wow.
The classic sherry cask is actually a butt, which is a 500-liter barrel.
Okay.
And so it can soak in a lot of that wine. So if you use a first fill sherry cask to finish your whiskey, then that 30 liter of sherry is going to influence your flavor profile a
Sure.
whole bunch, because by leaving the whiskey very shortly in there, it's not going to oxidize and I don't want to say destroy, but just dissipate the sherry itself.
That's right.
Whereas when you do a full maturation process for a minimum of 12 years, like in the 12-year-old double cask here, that sherry is completely dissipated by the time that the whiskey is ready to be bottled.
Right.
And so it leaves place to a bit of more complexity in terms of the sherry flavor, rather than having a very red fruit, winey flavor to the whiskey.
Right.
It gives a definite fruitiness to it, but more in the sense of a dry fruit kind of an aspect to it. And
Yeah.
this is definitely what you get in 12 Double Cask. At first, what you get is going to be the sweet notes, lots of vanilla and honeys, but a nice caramel and butterscotch balance in there,
Yeah.
due to the fact that it uses both American oak and European oak sherry cask, with a predominance of American oak for sure, which gives it a bit more sophistication, a bit more complexity in my humble opinion. Then you get the fruitiness, and then the finish. Lots of spices, a lot of those oaky tannin that kind of balances out the sweetness to make a beautiful whiskey. Perfectly balanced, definitely casual dram right here.
Yeah. And as you were saying earlier, there's a bit more first fill in this one.
Yeah, so we get a full-bodied whiskey, even though it's at 40% ABV. You know, it's not one of those cash strength whiskey. I always like to say that I don't like to compare lower ABV whiskeys with higher ABV whiskeys,
Right, yeah.
because for me it's just as relevant as comparing, let's say, a non-PD whiskey to a PD whiskey.
Right, yeah.
They all serve different purposes, but we ensure that we have a very full-bodied whiskey, complex whiskey, by having a good portion of first fill sherry cask in there.
Interesting. I'm interested to try that one. I have tried the U.S. expression, and it's excellent. I'm very impressed with it. So I'll be reviewing that shortly, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Then another one, this one I get a lot of questions about.
Yeah.
Just because, first of all, let's be honest, it pops off the shelf.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful orange
Yeah,
bottle.
exactly.
And it's been getting a lot of attention in the whiskey community lately, especially since it's one of those very, very geeky kind of product.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, one of the big controversy, or discussion rather, that we're having right now in the Scotch industry is the whole transparency movement. And a bunch of distillers and whiskey producers have weighed in, given their position on this. And this is the Macallan statement in the transparency movement. What we did with this is make a whiskey that is as transparent as possible without breaking any law.
Right.
We're still within what is allowed by the SWA in terms of what we can do, but we want to bring some attention to this interest that the whiskey consumer have in knowing more about what comes in those whiskeys. So the Edition series, which is a yearly series, we launched last year, edition number 1, which was a US exclusive product,
Right.
was launched, and this year we got edition number 2. And this one is actually a partnership between our master blender, Bob Delgarno,
That's right.
and the Roca brothers from El Celler de Can Roca, which is 2 times winning best restaurant in the world.
Wow.
Now the Roca brothers, the chefs of the restaurant, actually came over to the distillery and selected some barrels with Bob, using their nose, using their palates, which are very, very sophisticated.
Yeah, it would have to be to have a 2-time winning best restaurant in the world.
Exactly. And they chose some specific cask for the influence that they would bring to the whiskey, and then Bob took those cask types, which were 4 different types of cask, a total of 372 casks, and
Wow.
did a vatting, limited edition. Very obviously, this is a very small vatting.
Do you know exactly how many bottles were produced?
I don't know exactly how many bottles were produced. It's not one of those, impossible to find
Right.
kind of limited
Yeah.
edition. It's not a 14,000, 20,000,
Okay.
but it is limited in the sense that once it's gone,
It'll be
it's
gone
gone.
forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not going to be another bottling of it. But it's not necessarily one of those products where you have to keep clicking on an auction site in order to get a
Right.
bottle. And it's priced as such as well, coming in at 175,
Yeah.
just about. I don't know about you, but for me,
That's-
collectible Macallan,
Yeah,
that's
that's-
unheard of. I've never
yeah.
seen this in my
You're
lifetime. And what you get is a lot of whiskey also for your buck here. So when you purchase edition number 2, the box actually tells you every single cask type that went into making it and who selected those barrels. So whether it's European or American oak
Right.
that made the barrel, which bodega actually produced the sherry that seasoned the barrel, and whether it's a first fill or a second fill cask. But we even go further in giving you exactly the breakdown of the percentages of the cask sizes.
Right.
Because instead of using only the classic sherry butt, we also use puncheons and hogshead.
Right. Now, Hogshead is a smaller of the 3. right?
Half of a sherry butt exactly is
Yeah.
250 liter.
Yeah.
So each of the sherry of those different types of cask will give a different influence to the whiskey, which is also described on the box, which
Yeah.
is super interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So you really get all the information that's legally allowed to put on a label of whiskey for this one. On top of that, a higher proof, 48.2% ABV for this one, gives you a very, very full-bodied, creamy, unctuous
Right.
whiskey, which is Macallan known for.
Yeah, that's one of the things that surprised me most about this is that it was 48% and you didn't have to add a drop of water. If you didn't want
Absolutely.
to.
So the reason why it's at 48.2, which is not cask strength, is because working with the Roca brothers, that's the strength that Bob came up to make a whiskey that is at its ideal strength
Right.
at that point, according to him, but also the people that he partnered with. Super interesting to add whiskey to add to your collection,
Yeah.
and to enjoy amongst people you like to discuss whiskey with,
For
because it's definitely a cracker of a pour right there.
I agree.
What else can I add on this one? It's very, very simple. This is kind of the little geeky part on it. Just beneath edition number 2 here, you can kind of see the lingo that they use to describe a whiskey vatting at the distillery.
Okay.
So C4 refers to the fact that it's 4 different types of cask.
All right.
V372 is the number of cask in the vatting.
Oh, wow.
T is the tint of the whiskey, the color, T21. So you can go on the Macallan website and kind of see exactly which color it refers to, because this is natural color whiskey,
Right,
non-chill filtered, and then 2016, the year it was bottled, and the number of the edition.
So it is non-chill filtered then?
Absolutely.
Wow.
A lot of people ask me the question, is
Yeah.
it chill filtered, is it non-chill filtered? And then anything that we produce that's above that mark, that threshold of 45.7
Yeah.
is going to be non-chill filtered.
Okay, wow.
And then people ask me, why isn't it on the label? Well, that's because in whiskey making in Scotland, if it's above 45.7, it's
It's
non-chill
assumed.
filtered.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
all right.
I don't know of any whiskey that's above 45.7 that's been chill filtered.
Interesting. Okay, see, you know what, I didn't know that, so I'm learning today too.
There's kind of a craze that's going around non-chill filtration, so obviously a lot of companies are taking advantage of that and making it kind of a marketing term that they put on their,
Yeah,
bottle.
yeah, for sure. A lot of people are using that as one of the check marks for what to look for as a whiskey. So
Exactly.
from a sales perspective, I could definitely see why companies would want to do
Yeah.
that, because that's what whiskey people are looking for nowadays. And And that's great information because I didn't know that personally, that it was non-chill filtered.
You know, there's a possibility that there are some whiskeys that are non-chill filtered, that are chill filtered above 45.7.
Yeah.
But I never
Right.
encountered
haven't.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
In my career. And you know, the same goes for our natural color. You see, none of the whiskeys produced by either Macallan or Highland Park have ever been or will ever be colored with E158.
Wow. See, I didn't know that about Highland Park either.
Yeah, this is 100% natural color. You know, we spend so much resources, both time and money on our barrels,
Yeah.
that it just makes sense to us to fully demonstrate what the cask gives to the final product.
Okay.
And I know some people will say, well, you know, the caramel coloring doesn't change the flavor to the
That's
whiskey,
right,
which
yeah.
is absolutely true.
Yeah.
I never said anything against that, but for us, it's just one of the signs of our commitment to the quality of whiskeys that we produce. We go that extra mile
Yeah.
to make the highest quality whiskeys that we can.
Now, I know it's non-age, no age statement
Yep.
for a reason, but I remember you having some knowledge as to like some of the other expressions. Did they reveal that at all with the Macallan edition #2?
To be honest, I haven't even asked the question yet.
Really?
For some of the other expressions, you know, it kind of comes naturally into conversation.
Right.
For the editions series, I've never even thought of asking about the question because all the relevant information is on
It's
there.
Yeah, it's there. You're right.
You add the age to this, it doesn't tell me anything more than I need to know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it tastes at least 15 years old or older, but I could be wrong. Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but the average for me feels at least 15 or older.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even able to go down that alley of,
Yeah, no
kind of
problem.
having,
No, yeah.
just because I've tried so many 15 years old that are all so different.
Yeah,
You
you're
know,
right.
a 15-year-old that's aged in a second filled bourbon barrel, and a 15-year-old that's aged in a first filled sherry cask.
Yeah.
I mean, the 15 is out the window for me. The type of the barrel is really what gives me the information here.
Yeah.
So I'll probably, if ever I get the chance of meeting Bob again sooner than later,
Yeah.
I might ask the question, and he might just kind of roll his eyes at me.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's not important. At the end of the day, it's not important how old
Exactly.
it is. It's the quality speaks for itself,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And I've had this discussion with some of my subscribers, but personally, I love that expression. It was my first A+ on my channel. so-
Amazing, glad to hear it. But you know what? If ever I get the information, I'll be more than happy to share it.
I appreciate that.
And then we have kind of our jewel right here, the Rare Cask, which has been kind of a superstar, created a big buzz in the whiskey industry, just because when the non-age specific, the NAS conversation was going on,
Yeah.
was kind of at its peak. We came out with this whiskey, which is non-age specific, but that got amazing reviews. That created a lot of excitement in the industry in terms of the quality of the product that's in the bottle. And you know, this is definitely a great example of the genius of our master blender, Bob Villagarno. This is a product that kind of organically happened at the distillery. It's just the result of an anomaly that happens when Bob does his classic work. And here's what I mean by that. So Bob, our master blender, his job is every day he comes in around 6 a.m. To the distillery, and that day he's going to smell hundreds of samples of whiskey. He comes in that early because that's when he feels his nose is at the best to really perceive all the flavors. Now, when you go through that many whiskeys, you're bound to stumble upon some casks that have just a bit more character, more richness to them, more of a particularity to them. And this is the kind of cask that he sets aside and he labels as Rare Cask.
Wow. Okay.
And by the end of this cycle, which is about 18 months that it takes him to go through the 280,000 barrels that we have at the distillery, he's going to have 800 to 1,200 of those barrels set aside. So far less than 1% of all the casks that we have available at the distillery.
Not that many.
No, exactly. And those are all super special casks. The thing is, he also goes into his reserve of experimental barrels that are not necessarily used for our core range expressions, such as the Gold, the Amber, the 12 Double Cask, and the Sienna. So instead of using up to 4 different types of sherry casks to create this bottling, he's going to use up to 16 different types of sherry casks,
Wow.
which is by far the most types of sherry casks that we've ever used in a single bottling of Macallan.
Okay.
And this was his approach for this whiskey. He wanted to make the most complex Macallan ever. And he achieved that beautifully, because this is truly what you get with Macallan Rare Cask. It's not one of those whiskeys that wants to be a punch of a whiskey like some
Right.
of those super peaty cask strength whiskey. This wants to be more on the sophisticated side and give you that long-lasting, complex finish. And when you try this Scotch, it just gives you so much flavor. It kind of touches upon the whole spectrum of flavor you can expect from Macallan,
Yep.
but at different levels.
Yeah, and I made comment to that a few times when I review Macallan's. It's such an identifiable smell and taste compared to other whiskeys. Like, you give me 20 whiskeys, I'll be able to pick out the Macallan more than any other one.
I absolutely agree. I find that our whiskeys, they achieve to do something where that refinement and kind of that attention to detail is really showcased in the flavor palette, the aroma palette of our whiskeys. So, and getting back to the ages, the first time we bottled Macallan Rare Cask, we were touching upon 3 different decades, roughly around 1637 years.
Wow.
For the whiskeys that went into there. And it's not like there's a drop of the older stuff. It's really a full barrels that are in the vatting. So it's really how we achieve those different layers of flavors by combining perfectly mature whiskey from different decades.
Right.
Now the reason why that's not mentioned on the label is, as everybody knows, it's not legal to mention all the ages. You can only talk to the youngest whiskey
Right.
in there.
That's
and
right.
So that mention would have to change from one bottling to the other.
Okay.
Which, as a product that is not necessarily a vintage, it's not something that we want to do anymore.
Yeah, and you can tell that Bob holds this one close to his heart because of the difference in bottle shape compared to all their other expressions.
Absolutely. Well, Bob says, if I'm going to take 18 months to make a whiskey, I want it to be very, very high-end from start to finish.
Yeah. I'm just going to double check to make sure we're still recording here because we have said some very important things. We are. Perfect. All right, so that's our Macallan side of this. Now we have
a Highland Park, which is kind of the Scotch world's worst kept secret. What I mean by that is, Macallan is a much larger player, 3rd largest producer of single malt in the world, which by any means is still microscopic when you compare it to some of the American whiskey producers or even Irish whiskey producer, which allows us to still make something that's very hands-on, very crafty. But then you move into Highland Park, which is much more of a niche distillery. Lots of factors kind of contribute to that. First and foremost, we're one of the oldest distillery in Scotland, established in 1798. Now, then again, if you've heard more than one brand ambassador, it feels like every single distillery is one of the oldest active distilleries in Scotland. That's nothing really, really new. But we've been making whiskey much longer before that date. That's actually only when we really started paying our taxes, right? We have a very, very rich history of making what I like to call less than legal whiskey beforehand. But what is known today as the distillery Highland Park is actually the northernmost distillery in Scotland as well.
Okay.
So we're located in small islands called the Orkney Islands, which are off continental Scotland up to the north, on the same latitude as Norway. That kind of gives you an idea of how far up north we are. Actually, Orkney Islands used to belong to Norway up until the 1400s before joining Scotland.
Okay, now I'm getting a geography lesson. I did not know that either.
And that might sound like a detail, but it's very important because it really molds our identity.
Well, it does, because it explains why they use that like Viking-looking.
Exactly. So the Orkney Islands are home to the 2nd oldest Viking ruins in the world.
Okay.
Number 1 being here in Canada, in Newfoundland. But being that remote also explains why we're much more of a small company. So imagine back in the 1700s, 1800s, when you have limited space to grow your barley, when it's that much harder to get barrels up to your island, where do you get the copper to make your stills? There's a lot of work that goes into making this, so everything had to kind of be on a smaller scale, which it still is today, because we still make the whiskey the same way today as we did back then. Admittedly, we work around the clock nowadays. We're working at full capacity, but it makes for a very, very mythic, legendary distillery that is Highland Park. Now, we're known to make a very unique type of whiskey, which is kind of expected by how unique our location is, which is a slightly smoky, slightly peaty Scotch. As opposed to some of the peatier expression that come from our cousins in Islay, what we do is a whiskey that uses only about 20% of the barley that's going to be malted using peat.
Oh, wow.
Which we still malt by hand at the distillery. One of a handful of distilleries still to hand malt our barley by hand. And this is really how we achieve that unique flavor profile as we harvest our peat from a bog that's called Hobbister Moor.
Okay.
And we're the only distillery in the world to actually harvest our peat from there.
Oh, wow.
Now, as you may know, conditions when it comes to temperature in the Orkney Islands aren't really favorable. So there's not a lot of stuff that grows out there.
I was gonna say it's probably a little colder than.
It's a little bit colder. It's a lot windier. It's a lot rainier, if that's even possible.
Okay.
We're talking about average wind speed of 60 miles per hour
Okay.
and about 180 to 200 days of rain a year.
Wow.
So the main vegetation is actually heather.
Okay.
Small purplish flower that grows all around the island,
Mhm.
and when it dies and decays, it actually creates our peat.
There you go.
So our peat has that very mossy, earthy, and honey-like kind of quality to it. And it is mixed with a bit of live heather as well.
Yeah.
So when we peat our barley, this is where we achieve a bit of that kind of heather honey flavor that is trademarked to Highland Park.
Yeah, because it's a very different like type of peat taste than you would get, like you said, in the Isla region. Right?
Absolutely, it's a lot more aromatic rather than medicinal, which is kind of my one phraser to kind of explain to someone who's a bit maybe a little less of a connoisseur when it comes to whiskey.
Yeah.
So the fact that our peat has a much lower organic content to it makes it less medicinal to it. It doesn't have that iodine kind of quality to it.
Oh, makes sense.
So 20% of the barley is going to be a peated barley, and then 80% is going to be non-peated.
Okay.
And the result is a scotch that's going to be anywhere from 3 to 20 parts per million of peatiness.
So definitely on the lower end.
Yeah, of the still. That's even before the aging process.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So after the aging process, we're going to be left with somewhere between 8 to 12 parts per
Right.
million, depending on the expressions.
The lower, the
older
it gets, right?
Exactly. And I think those are a great expression also to kind of experience that, the 21 being noticeably peatier than the 25. But it's not only about the age in this case, it's the 21 is actually a whiskey that's aged in American oak sherry cask,
Okay.
whereas the 25 uses European oak sherry cask.
Oh, okay.
Now, American oak having a tighter grain, Quercus alba, that white oak, it's not going to take over the peatiness as much over the aging process.
Okay.
Whereas Quercus robur, the European oak, red oak, is going to impart a lot more tannins, a lot more of those sweet flavors that's going to balance out the peatiness.
Okay.
So you can see a lot more peatiness in the 21 than in the 25, but still on the very low end.
Right. Yeah.
As far as peated whiskeys go, Highland Park is kind of the extreme low that you can get.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree.
Interesting to have those 25, very classic whiskey. One of the first whiskey to get 100 points out of 100 in its reviews. Known around the world as one of the more iconic, more consistently highly rated kind of single malt out there.
For
And the
sure.
21, kind of underrated in my opinion. I think a lot of the American oak Highland Parks are not getting the recognition that they deserve, just
Okay.
because a lot of people expect the European oak
Right, that makes sense.
flavor profile, which is what we're more known for,
Yeah.
and not knowing what to expect with some of our odd numbers expression, I like to
Right,
call the 25
yeah.
kind of breaks that rule.
Yeah.
But up until then, the odd numbers are all the American oak
Okay.
age whiskeys. So the 10, the 15, then the 21.
Okay. So the 15 is not available in Ontario. Is that no longer being made, or?
So we had the 15 in Canada up until about 2013.
Okay.
And then it was reserved for some specific market, namely the United States. But in last September, we stopped production of the 15 and the 21.
Okay.
As we're working at maximum capacity, we're trying to fill more European oak sherry cask than American oak sherry cask.
Makes sense.
As I just said, it is kind of what we're known for.
Yep.
And so those expressions are slowly disappearing. So anyone who sees some Highland Park 15 or 21, great bottles to get your hands on. If you don't already have them in your cabinets.
Yeah, if you're in the U.S., stock up on the 15. I saw that
Yeah.
for a very reasonable price on Total Wine.
Absolutely, and 21 is available in Canada right now in SEQ and LCBO.
Yeah. All right. So, did you want to try one of these?
We can definitely try some whiskeys. I'm not supposed to crack open this bottle,
Yeah,
but
no
I
worries.
will.
Okay.
Because what
Breaking rules over here every day, guys.
What good is whiskey if it's stuck in that bottle? Unless you have two of those.
Well, I know a lot of my subscribers would agree with that statement for sure. So.
So let's start with the 12-year-old Double Cask, just as it's our lightest expression.
Thank you.
but also because you haven't tried kind of this Canadian one. And you know what, I definitely ask anyone to kind of put that the 40% ABV version next to the 43% ABV version. If anything, I find a bit more complexity in the 40%, right. But in terms of mouthfeel, body, texture, length, it's exactly the same. Mm-hmm. That 3% ABV really doesn't serve much of a purpose other than having, you know, two distinct expressions at this point. Mm-hmm. So as we said earlier, to me, and you give me your opinion on this, this is classic Macallan. You 100%. Said you could pick it out of a group of whiskey, you get that nature of the sherry in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that it's the one whiskey in the world, for me personally, that I can pick out of a lineup of 20. It's the only whiskey for me, but there are other people that maybe have a more sophisticated nose than I do. Yeah, and this definitely has that Macallan quality to it.
So the nose to me is all honey and a bit of butterscotch. Apple is kind of that classic. Mm-hmm. For me, that's the apple. The fresh apple is kind of that nature of the Macallan. Mm-hmm. And that comes down to our distillate, actually. Okay. So Macallan uses some of the smallest stills in Scotland, the second smallest one in Speyside, as far as I know. And the result is a maximized surface of contact between the liquid and the copper. Okay. And the result is a more aromatic, heavier style of new make spirit, especially since the column on our pot still, the neck of it is going to be much shorter than the average, standing at barely 6 feet tall. Okay. So the result is a creamier, unctuous, viscous new make spirit, but it has a lot of those aldehydes that give you that fresh apple flavor. A cool story that I've been told is that we actually had some Calvados maker that were visiting the Macallan distillery. And by walking into the distillery, they were amazed at how much of the apple smell that they would get, and that comes from people who make brandy out of apple. Wow. So it's kind of a cool statement.
Yeah.
And on the palate, I mean,
beautiful.
That creaminess, oiliness of the whiskey that I was just talking about, mm-hmm. Full body. And then the finish, nice spiciness and nice intensity to it. Yeah. But still a very casual whiskey.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's sweet enough that you could have it after dinner if you want to, but it's not overwhelmingly sweet that it's like a dessert.
No, exactly. It's definitely got that balance on the finish with the oakiness, the chocolatey notes, and the tannins that come through. Yeah, I see a lot of empty 12-year-old double cask bottles in my near future.
It's definitely one that you're going to want to stock up on, I think.
Absolutely. So I'm going to keep working on that one, but got a few ones that I want you to try here. So edition number 2, which I think you've already reviewed.
Yeah.
I like having it side by side between the 12 and this one.
Okay.
Here's the reason why. It's not as much to compare them, but as to see the influence of a higher proof on our whiskeys.
Right.
And it kind of makes sense afterwards why I say that you don't compare a higher proof whiskey with a lower proof whiskey.
Right.
Just because those two scotches are actually quite similar in the approach that we take to select the barrels, in the sense that it has a little bit more American oak than it does European oak, mm-hmm. which is what 12-year-old double cask is all about. Although I expect 12-year-old double cask to have a lot more American oak than European. But it kind of gives you that idea of what the balance between the two types of oak is, kind of as a progression, mm-hmm. and then amplifies those flavors. It was interesting. This one was in my car, so it was a bit cold. It's getting back to room temperature.
Yeah, we're there almost.
Both this one and the 21, you could actually see a bit of a blurriness into them.
Yeah, because
and that's how you know that they're non-chill filtered.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I did mention it in my review that if it tasted like it was not chill filtered, the oiliness, the creaminess, it was just so.
Yeah, so below 45.7, the chill filtration really doesn't impact the texture of the whiskey, mm-hmm. just because you don't have enough alcohol in there, enough ethanol to dissolve all of the proteins and all of the wood extracts that give it that texture. And so those get filtered out with just through the regular filtration process. I mean, if you can see them by eye, just by cooling down the whiskey, that means that if you pass it through a filter, those would be removed.
Removed, right, exactly.
But here's the thing, when you have less than 45.7, even without chilling down the whiskey, those are still in suspension at room temperature. And so they get filtered out through chill filtration just to avoid that aesthetic kind of component when it's on the shelf.
Makes sense.
But it doesn't impact the flavor profile. The SWA has actually done the research to see if we could tell the difference between a chill filtered and non-chill filtered whiskey at below 45.7%. Above that mark, you have enough alcohol to dissolve the whole content in terms of the solids in there, and so you don't need to take that approach.
Wow, okay, see, so I know a lot of people that say they wish they had the exact same expression, one chill filtered, one non-chill filtered, and that's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the chance of doing it. So being in Scotland at the Macallan distillery, we did a little experiment where we were making our own expression of 12-year-old double cask. And so we would, Bob came out with about 60 different samples that we had to sample in a 12-year-old double cask, which kind of gives you an idea of how small our vattings are.
Yeah.
Only 60 casks.
Yeah, wow.
Obviously, I failed terribly at reproducing the 12-year-old double cask at the time, but then Bob very gladly showed us exactly how he does it. And so we tried that expression, and it came up that hadn't been filtered yet because we only used cask samples, made the expression, dialed it down to 40%,
Right.
and then didn't filter the whiskey yet.
Okay.
And I couldn't tell the difference between the two expressions, the chill filtered expression and non-chill filtered expression.
Okay.
So my personal experience, make of it what you make, but it's at a higher proof that would show.
Okay, so that makes sense though, because the higher proof gives it that thicker viscosity, I find. Well, and then the chill filtration does the extra work.
Exactly.
So, so should I give this one a
Go ahead.
Super creamy.
Yeah,
this one.
absolutely. So that's what you get from the bit of higher proof from Macallan. Just once again, coming back to those small stills. The higher the ethanol concentration for us, the more amplified that creaminess is. But what's interesting is that you can take Macallan and put it next to a distillery that uses bigger stills or higher necks on their stills. And even a 40% ABV expression becomes extremely creamy.
Yeah.
So we're kind of going into an extreme here, kind of into a very trademark approach of what makes Macallan so special.
Yeah, I agree, because this is still very creamy.
It's a progression that makes sense, you know? Going the other way around, the 12-year-old might seem a lot thinner on the palate, but that's just because you've calibrated your palate in a certain way at that level.
Makes sense.
Now, that being said, it would be usually make a little bit more sense to kind of finish with the edition number 2 and have 12-year-old have the Rare Cask in the middle, just because it has a bit of a lower proof. But I don't think that would make rather justice to the complexity of this whiskey. And I think this one is really all about the flavor. To me, this is kind of the epitome of what a sherried whiskey is, and using kind of that wide array of casks really allows us to showcase that. So going from the sweet notes, which are elevated to a point where the vanilla is evolved towards creme brulee, the butterscotch is really into that creamy toffee, and then you have the chocolatey notes, but you have them kind of at every layer, like from white chocolate to milk chocolate to very dark, high cacao content chocolate, and then into a bouquet of spices that's absolutely fantastic, and finishing with those beautiful oaky notes. Lots of red fruits in there as well. You can start telling the influence of the sherry.
Yeah,
definitely.
sure, definitely.
That's the smaller barrels for you. That's the impact that they have.
Yeah. Now, when you do the progression, you notice different things about this that you wouldn't if you just went straight to
Straight to it, yeah, absolutely. Now that your whiskey has been exposed to kind of a punchier style of scotch in edition 2, which is rich in flavor, but not as complex. You know,
Right.
this one is to me, it's all honey, ginger, and apples.
Mhm.
It's really, really rich in those
I agree.
light spices and fresh white fruits fruitiness.
Yeah.
And then you go into Rare Cask, and then you see the full extent, kind of the full picture of the aromas that we're able to touch upon, because there's a lot more stuff going on in there.
Yeah.
You start getting some dates, some figs, some cherries, the spiciness. Yes, you have some ginger, but then the cinnamon, the nutmegs, the cloves come through,
Mhm.
and then that wide array of sweet notes.
Beautiful. That one's a really nice one.
Yeah, the 12-year-old, I keep reverting back to the one I have in my glass, but the Rare Cask is kind of that ultimate end of an evening whiskey. It's I had one of my friends that got married this summer, and we had 21-year-old fine oak for the grooms, but that was kind of the celebration whiskey was Rare Cask, because
Wow.
it's a special occasion,
Yeah.
and because it's something that even someone who doesn't know much about whiskey will appreciate.
100%. I agree.
I'm telling you, for my mom to try this and say this is special,
Yeah.
it has to be special.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I've let a few females try the Rare Cask, and they said the same thing. Wow, you can tell that that's just amazing whiskey.
And it's just a scientifically known fact that the female palate is just that much more able to discern flavor. So something that has a high complexity and where the alcohol is well integrated, where we really allow those flavors to shine through, is definitely something that I've been getting a lot of positive comments about.
Yeah. This, I mean, a lot of things to be excited about on the Macallan end coming out. I mean, for the longest time, Ontario anyway, didn't have aged expression. So I know there's a lot of people really excited about that, because it's been a while, right? So
It's been 4 years now. It's been 4 years that we've launched the 1824 series, which was not a replacement to the age statement. It's a standalone series,
Yep.
We still make all our age statement, never stopped, and there's no plan in stopping and making our age statement. It's just that we've been working at maximum capacity for 19 years now, and the demand for Scotch whiskey has increased 100%, if not more, in the recent years. So the result was that allocation of the whiskey coming out of the distilleries were different. Now, there's different approach that you can take when that comes up. Number one, you can raise your prices to kind of regulate the demand for the whiskey until you reach kind of that balance. That's something that we weren't willing to do, just because it would have meant that there would be absolutely no Macallans that were under $100 price point.
Yeah.
The second possibility is to have another product to come out of the market. Now, we were lucky enough that when that happened, in the same timing, we've been working for close to a dozen years on a new series, which is the 1824 series, and we decided to launch it. Now, we first launched it as something a little bit different called the 1824 Collection in the duty-free markets. That was about 7 years ago now.
Okay.
And that was kind of used as a test market. We were able to see where we were having more success, less success. And what we found out is that Canada and France had some of the best success rate, which is something that we kind of expected, because they're two of the larger wine markets in the world. And usually what you see with larger wine markets is a consumer that's a bit more educated as to what the palate wants. They're not necessarily buying a whiskey just because there's a beautiful number on it. They know that for them to like something, it has to be mature, and they really go with the flavor of the whiskey. So we launched the 1824 series here, and once kind of everybody got over the shock of having a non-age specific whiskey and actually tried the whiskey, really liked it. And we've been outgrowing the Scotch whiskey category ever since we launched it. We sell a lot more Macallan today with the non-age specific product than we did back when we had ages on it.
Wow. See, there you go.
So the proof is in the pudding, kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, is it something that everyone's going to agree with? Absolutely not. But if we were in the business of pleasing everyone and not in the business of making whiskey, we would have closed shop long time ago.
For sure.
So we make a style of whiskey that maybe some people enjoyed at the time and grew out of, which is possible, and some people grow into this style of whiskey. And the successes that we've been having with the 1824 series is absolutely fantastic. Now, we're able to come back with an age statement in the 12-year-old Double Cask simply because since we've been managing our casks along those lines, where we kind of saw that increase in demand coming in, we were able to manage our casks in order to, supply a little bit more of those whiskey that uses two different types of sherry cask, American oak and Spanish oak sherry cask. And building on the success of the 1824 series, we're now able to sustain an age statement whiskey in every markets around the world that uses that approach of using those two different types of casks.
Okay.
When you think about it, when we had the 10, the 12, 15, even 17 and 18, people don't realize, but some people don't realize, but those were two different series. The 10, 15, and 17 were what we call the Fine Oak series, which uses three different types of casks.
That's right.
American oak sherry cask, Spanish oak sherry cask, and bourbon barrels.
Bourbon barrels.
Then we had the 12 and the 18, which was our sherry oak series, uses only European oak sherry casks.
And that went up to the 25 as well. I think
Up until, the 21 was fine oak, 25
that's right.
was sherry oak. We even had 230s, which
Yeah.
were fine oak and
And
sherry
sherry,
oak.
yeah.
And we just relaunched for the first time since 2007 a 40-year-old, which is sherry oak as well. Now this one, the 12-year-old double cask, kind of falls in between those two different types of series.
Right.
One uses three different types of cask, one uses one type of cask, this one uses two, and
yeah.
it kind of falls in the middle.
Yeah. So should we expect that there may be a 15-year-old or?
Right now, we're so focused on launching kind of our new expression, the 12 and the edition 2, that in the foreseeable future, this is what we're gonna see in Canada. We're gonna see edition number 3 coming out next year as well.
That's right.
Which should be released in the US in the coming months. This should be coming hopefully within a matter of weeks in the LCBO, if not very, very shortly, I am sure.
Yeah.
And for now, the 12-year-old double cask is what we have.
Okay. Interesting. So what do we have here?
So what we have here is the Highland Park 21. Discontinued whiskey, something that we don't produce anymore.
Right.
So as I said earlier, this one is aged mostly in American oak sherry cask.
Beautiful.
It uses a high proportion of second fill barrels. Obviously, a first fill barrel don't necessarily always allow you to age whiskey for longer periods of time. But at both Macallan and Highland Park, we never use our sherry casks more than twice. So second fill barrels and first fill barrels is what you're going to find in there, although there's more second fill barrels.
In the 21.
In the 21, yeah, exactly. This one is bottled at higher proof, 47.5% ABV as well, which really allows us to showcase kind of the richness of the sherry cask, which is still very, very, very present in that final whiskey.
Yeah.
A lot of that heather honey coming off the nose, nice
Definitely.
peatiness as well.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of the American oak aging Highland Park to me. It really allows us to showcase kind of the nature of our spirit.
It's got a beautiful nose on it.
Absolutely. There's something special about the older expression of Highland Parks in the sense that they're still lively. I've tried a lot of whiskeys going over 18-year-old and they kind of fall asleep by then.
I would agree, actually. I find that happens too often.
Yeah, more often than people are willing to admit once they spend the money on one of those expressions.
Yeah.
And what I find is that even I had the chance of trying all the Highland Parks up to our 50-year-old, and that's kind of the thing that happens in those whiskeys where they're still alive, and that has a lot to do with where we're located. The resting period for our whiskey is much more stable.
Okay.
Our angel share is going to be merely 1%.
Wow, that's
because of
very good.
Yeah. So it allows us to really age the whiskey over long periods of time. But the downfall to that is that the production levels are very, very slow, because obviously not every cask has the potential of reaching that age.
Right, makes sense. Just for those of you that are unaware, angel share is the evaporation that occurs naturally in the barrel when it is aging.
Exactly. So that's going to change depending on the weather where you age your barrels. Typically in Scotland, we're talking about an average of 2 to 3% per year. Might sound like a great place where to become an angel, but when you think about Kentucky, where you're going to be talking about
right.
5 to 6% a year,
Yeah.
if not more.
Yeah, exactly. And for some of my subscribers, I recently did a Villalon, which is from Taipei, and their angel share is
Can go up to
astronomical.
20%
Yeah, it's
on a very, very bad year, absolutely.
Yeah, so the hotter the climate, the higher the angel share.
Yeah, which is why you don't see a lot of single malts coming from those, tropical, subtropical weathers.
That's right. Yeah. So should I give this one a sip?
Please go ahead.
But even here, it's a subtle peat. It's not an overwhelming peat. It's not an Isla peat at all. If you're not a peaty guy, this is definitely the one to try first because.
Yeah, absolutely. I use Highland Park all the time to introduce people to peated malts, especially people transitioning from maybe the bourbon world or just got into the Scotch world and are focused a lot more on those non-peated Speysides or Highlands or Lowlands. And then Highland Park 12 is kind of my classic malt to tell them a little bit about peat and kind of ease their way into there. I remember the first time I tried a peated malt was a Lafroy quarter cask, and back then I was sure that the person was trying to poison me. So I think
that's one of the first times I tried as well. Similar experience though.
And I think that's something that Lafroy is proud of, right? When you look at their campaign of opinions welcome, where you could tweet your opinion about how Lafroy tasted to you, and they got some very positive, but also some like comically negative comments on there, and they would show them all on the wall of the distillery. They would project them on the wall of the distillery, literally. So they're really open about the fact that that peatiness is a unique niche flavor. But I think that a whiskey that balances sweetness and smokiness, like Highland Park, really allows people to ease their way into there and not be averse to them, and maybe kind of make them willing to dip their toe a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. So I can imagine that the 25-year-old is even much less peatier.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the 25 on top of having.
While you're speaking, I'm just gonna check my battery because I know we're heading over the hour mark, I think. Yeah, or just about the hour mark. We're still good though for.
Still good.
So we're still running. We're
Excellent.
Good. Yeah.
So the 25, lot less peatier, just because yes, there's further aging, but there's actually use of European oak sherry cask in there.
Yeah, which is predominantly European oak?
Yeah, it's all European oak, all second fill barrels at this point.
Okay. And is there, a lot of companies use first or second fill, but when they get to the second fill, when they get to the older expressions, they're afraid to use first fill. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, most of the older expressions are going to be in second fill barrels, just because of first fill barrels. First fill barrel is going to mature the whiskey at a rate where it's not going to allow it to reach 25 years.
Makes sense.
The aging process is not just as simple as putting a whiskey in there and being patient enough for it to reach 65 years of age. The barrel and the whiskey inside it has to evolve in a way where the peak of the quality of the whiskey is not reached until then. Now, once your whiskey reaches its peak, if you leave it in there, it's not getting any better.
Makes sense.
You might start extracting some flavors from the oak that will throw off the balance of your whiskey. You might lose too much to the angel share to the point where the liquid dips under the 40% mark, and so it cannot be legally called whiskey out of Scotland. And those are things that can and that do happen rather frequently.
Okay.
It's not every barrel that is filled at a distillery that's all going to be used in one of their single malts.
So could they use, let's say something dips under the 40% to 37. Could they use something with a higher ABV, to bring it up a little
Absolutely,
bit?
absolutely. It's been done before, and some of the very, very old expression will do that.
Right, I can imagine a 40-year-old.
40-year-old, 50, 55. Macallan has just launched a 65-year-old, and I wouldn't be surprised if like the 65-year-old whiskey was brought in just to amp up the proof of the older whiskeys that actually go into it.
Makes sense. This is another beautiful nose.
Yeah, the Highland Park 25 is kind of almost a religion to me. It's a religious experience whenever I get the chance to try it, and I might kind of allow myself a little dram here. I haven't had it in a while. Obviously, it's not one of those whiskeys that you open every day.
For sure.
There's not a lot going around.
This is a special occasion dram.
Yeah,
for sure.
We get this one in Canada only once a year.
Okay.
So whatever you see in the LCBO, that's one shipment, and by the time it's gone, and it usually goes very, very fast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but this one is just fantastic.
It's beautiful. Yeah, you barely pick up any peat.
Yeah, absolutely, and you start getting a lot of the influence from the sherry cask as well, which kind of balances the character of the distillery.
Definitely. I think this would be a great head to head for people to realize what American oak and what European oak, the differences between the two, because not a lot of people know and not a lot of people experience that.
Absolutely agree. You see, this one is at 45.7, so right on the ball right here for non-chill filtration. Is non-chill filtered, as a matter of fact.
And you said that's no added color as well.
No added color whatsoever. Which is interesting because the 25 is actually lighter in color than the 21.
Yeah, well, there is some portion of first fill
in the 21.
In the 21.
Which makes up for that color difference.
That's right. This is phenomenal.
It's perfectly balanced whiskey.
Yeah.
There's something so special that happens. You know, if I had to choose a favorite, it's hard for me to choose a favorite, right? It's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child.
Yeah.
Although don't ask my mom, she'll say me very obviously.
My mom definitely won't say me.
It's hard to choose a favorite, but you know, I have to kind of give a big thumbs up to the 25 here. Although I always have a reservation for calling a favorite whiskey of mine a whiskey that I wouldn't open every day. You know, like something that comes in at $900, definitely not a whiskey that
Right.
I'll allow myself on a regular basis. And so, you know, if you like the 25, I think the 18 is kind of
18's
spectacular.
Yeah, and it's at a reasonable price
Yeah.
point where you can manage to have it a little bit more than the special occasions.
Absolutely, and we actually at Edrington made something that's really rarely seen nowadays in the whiskey industry, where we took some profit off some of our margins off of the Highland Parks to allow us to decrease the prices on them.
Okay.
Bringing back Highland Park 18 to the $200 mark. I don't know if it's on shelf yet, but if it's not, it's going to be there soon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so that's some information for the LCBO goers that tend to get a little bit harassed when it comes to high prices at the LCBO, but that's an LCBO thing, not necessarily a distillery thing.
Exactly, and so in order to kind of try to help out our fans at Highland Park, we're taking moves and making moves in that direction, hoping that we're going to see kind of the enticement for the brand reach new highs very obviously.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that wraps it up for the 5 that we have here. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm sure my subscribers love that little lesson. Definitely more information today than I'm able to give. Very knowledgeable brand ambassador, and I really appreciate having you on.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
Thank you for having me, and I'll make sure to keep an eye on the comment section when you post the video, and if anybody has some questions, I'll be more than happy to get back to you in the comment section. So like, share, and comment.
Thank you very much, Nick. I
Cheers.
appreciate it. And that wraps it up, guys. Cheers.